All right, welcome to another live episode of GeekOutdoors.com. Hopefully the stream is working well. If you're watching this, if the stream isn't working well, please let me know. I've had some internet connection issues through my mobile phone. Okay, so this week it's going to have a lot more Linux news because there's more stuff going on this week for Linux. And so the first thing I'm going to be talking about is WhatsApp live tracking. Secondly, it's going to be Samsung Linux, and I'll explain what that means. And then finally, I'm going to be talking about Red Hat and how it's reached another milestone in the open source Linux community. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is WhatsApp just made an update that will allow live location sharing. And so if you are not familiar with what WhatsApp is, it's actually the most popular messaging application in the entire world. It has over 1 billion users. Okay, in terms of active users, it's probably going to be over 500 million per month. Maybe more than that. It's just a lot of people, and it's worldwide. And so WhatsApp is actually a company that originally started like in 2010, and by 2014, remember, this is an app. It was purchased by Facebook for $19.5 billion. Just kind of let that sink in. $19.5 billion. And that is more than the cost of companies that have been around in over 100 years. Just look at big companies out there and see their net worth. Even entire automotive companies. That one app was valued for more than those types of companies, okay? And I'll get into why that is so important, okay? And the live location, what it does is, just like it sounds, whenever you turn this feature on, and this is rolling out to WhatsApp users gradually. I think India was one of the first test markets because a lot of people in India use WhatsApp. And so what it allows you to do is there'll be a little feature that says location. And when you do that, it will track your location live. Okay, a lot of times location tracking, we're kind of used to that by now. And a lot of times it's like static. Okay, it'll tell you the app where you were maybe a few minutes ago or a few seconds ago. Whereas if something's live, it would tell people exactly where you are at any point in time. Obviously, as long as your internet connection is good. Okay, and so it allows you to share your location live pretty easily with family and friends and people that you trust. And then also it allows you to schedule when you want your location to be shared. Okay, so that's basically the simple premise of what live location sharing is. And so WhatsApp is saying this is a feature that allows people to securely share their location with people that they trust and that they care about. Okay, so they're really marketing it as a way to let people that know where you're at so that they know that you're safe and that they could meet up with you and communicate with you and so forth. And so a lot of companies, and we're no stranger to this, the tracking is not anything new. Okay, but more and more companies are marketing location tracking as a way to make sure that people that you care about are in a safe location. That's really the way that they're marketing it. They will always market it as a means to keep track of people you care about first, and they will also always mention that it is secure. Okay, that's one thing that all these companies who do any type of location sharing, they always mention the security part of it. And WhatsApp heavily talks about their end-to-end encryption. Okay, so that everything's encrypted so that there's no way that people could, hack into it and track where you're at. But in the real world, that's simply not true. Okay, I mean, it doesn't matter what is said. As you've known by any of the events that's happened here in the US in terms of, if you think about the NSA tracking and so many other types of trackings, and even if it was encrypted, there's so many other data points to collect from. And so with this particular move, since WhatsApp has over 1 billion active users, and it's owned once again by Facebook. Okay, and if you work in digital marketing like I do, and you do Facebook ads, which is really how Facebook makes their money now. I mean, it's a huge revenue stream, and it's going to get constantly bigger. Facebook has probably the most in-depth data on people's personal profile. I think even more so than Google. Because when you're in Facebook, you might think, oh, it's Facebook, you're on social media. But the amount of data they're able to collect, not only on you, but then all your connections, the type of habits that you have, what you click on, where you spend most of your time messaging, all of that is gathered together. So then it could provide Facebook ads, which is the platform that I use and many other people use. A lot of people use Facebook ads and Google AdWords to create ads so then we could market and advertise to you. And so going back to my original point, why is an app? Remember, it's an app. Hey, good morning, Rose. Thank you for joining. So why did a company pay $19.5 billion for an app? Just remember that amount and what I mentioned earlier. That's bigger than most companies that have been around 100 years. Bigger than most car companies, okay? So why did Facebook pay that much money, and why did the market value it that much? Well, for one reason, the data that can be collected from the users on that particular platform. Okay, because by the time WhatsApp was sold to Facebook, they had an installed base in 2014, if I remember correctly, of over 400 million users. So let that sink in. That's 400 million 400 million users in 2014, and they send billions of messages per day. Okay, so tons of data there. And then they have other services like conferencing and video and so forth. And so that is extremely valuable. Okay, it's not just the amount of users, it's what they're doing. Okay, what is being tracked. How can you monetize that? Okay, and it's like really not doesn't take rocket science. I want to make that simply to realize that type of data is extremely valuable to any company, period. Okay, because the more you know about your consumers or potential consumers, the more you'll be able to market, and the more obviously that will lead to actual revenues in the future. Every business works exactly the same. So that is why Facebook paid $19.5 billion for an app back in 2014. Rose, I've just deleted my Facebook account following Brian Ludwig procedure. Yeah, Rose, I use Facebook heavily, mainly for the PPC ad platform, okay? I don't use it personally because I know what they're doing with it, okay? Because I actually use that data. And a lot of people, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think a lot of people are trying to de-Google or de-Facebook your life. And I think, that's a good move in terms of if that's something that is very important to you. So the less, I would say, I myself do the same thing. I'm on the internet a lot, but the more you can control your exposure, the better. And so Facebook collects quite a bit of information, trust me. I mean, if you use Facebook ads, the targeting on Facebook ads is absolutely incredible. I mean, you could target really well, okay? And that's due to the fact that Facebook really has a lot of data and then use it in a way that is extremely powerful. And so by WhatsApp adding this live feature, it's going to add an even larger amount. And WhatsApp has said it previously, your data is private, we don't share that, but it's part of Facebook. They're going to share it, okay? So another reason why they're doing this is WhatsApp, not unsurprisingly, has offered these services for corporations where you can use WhatsApp for corporate conferences, and now with the live tracking, they'll be able to use that to do live tracking with their business associates, customers, and clients. Like, for example, airlines are going to be testing this out so that they can have one-to-one customer service with their customers. And by having live location tracking, they'll be able to know exactly where their customers are when they're flying. Okay, so, in general terms, this has much, much larger implications, okay? But by them doing this, having a user base of over 1 billion active users, that is a ton of data that they could collect. And so once this becomes more normal, and once again, I've mentioned this earlier, location tracking is nothing new. We have it on pretty much everything now. But when you have 1 billion active users all around the world, and it's going to be live location tracking, that is going to take it to another level. And in terms of privacy, we mention this all the time, it doesn't matter because there is no privacy. But it's just that the sheer amount of data and amount of people they're able to collect is pretty powerful. And so if you think about WhatsApp with 1 billion users around the world, the second largest user base is WeChat in China. I think they have an installed base of over 400 million. And I would kind of put Weibo on there as well. If you didn't know what Weibo is in China, Weibo is basically Facebook. They're the largest social media platform in China. And then after that, there is Line, that's out of Japan. That's the most popular messaging app. And so messaging or all the services surrounding it is huge. It's extremely huge. That is why Facebook bought this company back then. And I know Facebook has their own messenger platform, but compared to WeChat, compared to WhatsApp, it's pretty small. Okay, and now I think looking back, people understand why Facebook paid $19.5 billion. And so if you are a WhatsApp user or even use any of these messaging apps, just be prepared for more live location tracking or more features, it's like they like to call it, that will allow them to collect more data. Okay, that's actually where it's heading, and it's already there anyway. So Rose, I never use WhatsApp, Instagram, Snapchat, others, and I don't use Twitter. And so Rose is saying WeChat is monitored by Chinese government. Yeah, Rose, actually everything is monitored by the Chinese government. I mean, that's, if you've ever done business with Chinese counterparts, or you ever order from China, or you do anything like that, you have to understand that everything's controlled by them. And so if you do any type of business in China, number one, it's going to go through the governments, and so you kind of have to know the connections. So that's number one. I mean, and I'm talking big business. If you're just ordering things from Alibaba, that's kind of different. But still, at the same time, the largest companies in China are Tencent, Alibaba, which Alibaba is huge, okay, and they're massive. So you're going to deal with one of these companies, and because China's government, they blocked Facebook, so Facebook is not there in China. That's where the WhatsApp was actually blocked from there, and so they can control the competition as well. Okay, and Google is not there as well because Baidu is the largest search engine there. And so in China, it's different because you could have, let's just say, like for example, Facebook and Google, they both got blocked from China, right? They have a lot of money. They're not small companies. So in China, it doesn't matter how much money you have. In China, it's the connections that you have with the government officials who control who is able to compete in China, and also the relationships that they have with other Chinese companies or abroad. Okay, and so that's the difference in China. It's really about the connections that you have with people in power, primarily in government, because they're the ones who make the decisions on whether or not you could do businesses in there, and like how you can do business. And as everybody knows, China is huge. They have over 1 billion people, almost 2 billion. And so from a business standpoint, that's why everybody goes to China, because your potential market is absolutely crazy, and second to them is India. And so, yeah, it's very important if you are a business. That's why every business, it doesn't matter if they're from America, Canada, South, it doesn't matter. You want to do business in China and India because their population is so large. And their economies are growing. So a lot of them are going up to middle class and upper middle class. The economies are growing and scaling. And so if you could think about 10 or 20 years down the road, they're going to be massive. So I'm sorry to get off a tangent, but so that's why WhatsApp is rolling that out, is because they want to take advantage of the user base that they have. And so if you are in WhatsApp, and a lot of people are, or maybe you're in WeChat, Line, I'm on Snapchat myself, and I don't have my location tracking on, but I know that they're tracking things. It doesn't matter if you have your privacy off. And they also do face mapping as well. And so they map your face, and they also know your geolocation as well, and they also can take pictures or scan your video to see the background of your video, so they can identify where you're at even just by looking at the monuments that you have, even if you have location tracking off. And so there's a lot of sophisticated stuff there, but in the end they all do the same thing. They're collecting data, and the data, the way it's provided, is very important. And so that's why this live tracking feature has been turned on, or is being rolled out, because they want to use that and share that with Facebook, which Facebook owns WhatsApp. Okay, so if you do have a WhatsApp account, that's coming, or it's already rolled out to you. So moving on, let me see if Rose said anything else. Rose, the Chinese companies are just fake shell companies for the Chinese government. Yeah, Rose, I would actually disagree with that. These are real businesses. You know, I mean, just as I mentioned earlier, you have to do business in China and India. You have to, because the populations are so large. And I just mentioned Alibaba. If you're not familiar with Alibaba, Jack Ma, he's one of the wealthiest people in the entire world. And Alibaba is one of the largest Chinese companies, period. I think it's right behind Tencent. Okay? And so if you're doing business in China, you're going to be doing business with one of those companies, period. Okay? And then you're going to have to be involved with them one way or another. There's no way around it. Okay? So it's always going to be the Chinese government, and then you're going to do business with one of those companies. Okay? Because of the connections that they have, first and foremost, and then the sheer reach and the amount of money that they have. And so that's the reality. If you're going to do business, big business, China and India, they have to be on your roadmap, period. Okay? It doesn't matter. So, yeah, so, hey, Sam, good morning. Hey, Viper29, what's going on? Okay, so Sam, I just got done, and Viper just got done talking about WhatsApp and how they're adding the live location tracking as a feature, and how that really plays into the whole data tracking, but really, it really plays into the business end of it, as I just explained, you know, as we talk about a lot. But this is pretty big because of the fact that they have so many users, 1 billion users on that messaging application, and it's only going to get bigger. Okay, and so let's move on to some other news. And the second bit of news I want to talk about is Samsung Linux. Okay, so you're probably wondering what I'm talking about, because don't they already use Linux? They're using Android. Yes and no. Okay, so what this is talking about is, if you know some of the Samsung phones, they've been providing this service, I think, for the last 2 years. It's called DeX. And this isn't something new. So what you're seeing is, you know, the phone, when you dock it, right, you will have like this desktop environment, you know, so it runs on Android, as you know. And so whenever you have a Samsung phone with DeX, and you have the proper connection, right, then it will display it on a monitor, so you can use it like a desktop. So that's what DeX was. And you know, Samsung wasn't the first to do this. If you remember the Motorola phone, I think it was, I can't remember, it started with the A. It's been a while. But they were the first company, Android manufacturer, to allow you to use Android on a desktop. And if I can remember the name, I'll find it. Motorola was the first Android company, Android manufacturer to do that. And then Samsung released DeX, will allow you to use a desktop version of Android on your monitor. And Microsoft did this as well with their Windows Phone. And so what Samsung is working on is a feature called Linux on Galaxy. So through the DeX interface, they will provide you an app that will allow you to run a Linux distro through the app, which is pretty cool. Okay, so it's still not entirely a distro on a phone because it works through an app, and also it uses the same kernel that's on the same Linux kernel that's on the version of Android that you're using on your phone. So it's not completely a Linux distro on a phone. Okay, it's kind of like a virtual Linux distro, if I were to say. And right now it's not available to the public. It's primarily available for developers. And you know, Samsung has tried this before to really expand themselves. You know, and as you know, Samsung is the largest company in Korea. Okay, they're massive. You know, they just don't make phones. They have their own military, by the way. Samsung has their own military. and they're one of their largest sectors is their manufacturing and also their semiconductor. They're a huge company. Okay, and so they have tried, as you know, with Tizen, and now with Dex, and so Samsung is trying to expand, and they have been trying software outside of Android or even outside of other Android manufacturers, because I think this is important, and I don't think it's going to make a big impact right now. So in a lot of ways, Samsung is just doing a lot of testing, because this has been tried before. Like I told you, I think it's called the Motorola Atrix, where they really want to have your phone be everything. Okay, and so that would have been really cool. I was hoping that with the Motorola Atrix, the Windows Phone, with Samsung's attempts, I was hoping that would work, because it's nice to have your phone, because if you do any retro gaming, you could put all your emulators on there. You could connect a mini HDMI to your phone, connect it to your TV, and now with things like this, and with they've tried before, you don't need a computer. You just have your phone, and then you would have a mini keyboard, right, that could be connected through Bluetooth, and you could have a mobile computer. Okay, that's kind of like the dream. Your phones are so powerful. They are computers, and the great thing about Linux is, everybody knows, it's not a resource heavy operating system. Okay, hey Vasil, good morning. So Rose is saying, Rose, Samsung is trying to undermine purism. Perhaps I see a conspiracy. Haha. Yeah, Rose, I do want to talk about that. Undermine the Librefy Linux phone. Vasil is saying, hi there, Samsung Linux world has everything now. Yes. Thanks for joining, Vasil. So yeah, Rose, so to talk to your point, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I did want to talk about that, because we've been talking about a few weeks now of having the Linux distro on a phone, and this isn't anything new. Ubuntu phone's been there, but even it wasn't just Ubuntu that's trying to do mobile, right? If you even think about KDE Plasma, right, that desktop environment, you can put that on mobile devices, okay, and it will obviously change itself for a mobile screen. But we're really not there yet, okay, because when it comes to design, I'm not a designer myself, okay, but if you do UX design and all the programming that is involved underneath, it's really difficult for you to make that same experience work throughout every type of screen size configuration. It's not easy, okay. That's why you have Android and iOS for mobile. That's why you don't have one operating system for all these different devices, because it's a different type of experience. Apps work differently, your user interface, how things work, they're all different, okay. So that's why it's been so difficult for Linux to actually have something that will work well on mobile. And also, we talk about this so many times, it requires money. It requires research and development. It requires a lot of testing, and it requires support from other businesses who make this hardware. So yeah, but Samsung and many other companies know that, okay. And so besides the purism or OS, okay, which is going to be on the Librem 5 phone, okay, which will be coming out, there was also another one called Post-Market OS, okay, which is basically a modified, I think it's the Alpine Linux distro, and Alpine Linux distro, and it's a really lightweight distro, and that is supposed to work well on mobile. And I just mentioned earlier the KDE Plasma that'll work on mobile. And so all of these distros, and I've mentioned this before, they're all heading that way. And so the big companies, they want to be there as well. And so if they are developing these type of functions, which I think is awesome, then that means there will be more money pumped into it, because they will be putting money into this to do the R&D. And as you know, if you are part of the Linux community, you do have to contribute back any code that you have developed back into the open source community, okay. And so that's the good thing. If you don't know, if you're new to the whole Linux world, it's user driven, okay. And so all the source code and everything is maintained by an open source community. But the thing is, it has a lot of contributors, okay, from open source, proprietary, a lot of big companies. And as a matter of fact, the largest company that contributes code is Intel, okay, and they deliver a lot. And then second to that, and I'll get to this company, is Red Hat Linux. But then also big companies like Google, Samsung, Apple does do something with open source, believe it or not, they do. And definitely Microsoft is in there as well. And so there is a lot of different people, companies, both open source and proprietary, both profit and non-profit. They are all contributing to the whole Linux community, ecosystem, and code base. And so when Samsung's doing something like this, where they are developing right now through an app, a way for you to run a full Linux distro on your mobile device, well, the great thing is, whatever they learn from that, they will contribute that code back to the Linux community. And guess what? Since it is open source and is shared, the Linux community could take advantage of all the R&D and the research that Samsung, a big multi-billion company, put in to that code, and now we can use it for ourselves. And so other people can use that. They could fork the code, make their own version, and then, you know, it'll help accelerate this process. And so that's why I think the Samsung edition of Linux on Galaxy, or I like to call it the Samsung Linux phone, I think it's important, okay? And don't be surprised if Microsoft gets into this soon, because they are kind of heading that way anyway. If you obviously, you know that you can run a version of Ubuntu Bash natively in Windows 10. Okay, I have covered that before. And so I think this is a big thing. Okay, maybe not now, but for the future, you know. And I just mentioned, and Rose just alluded to the Purism OS. I mentioned the KDE Plasma working on mobile devices, and also the Postmarket OS too. And so sooner than later, next year, maybe next year, we will have way more distros that are optimized for mobile, and that's exciting to me. Okay, and so let's get to the last piece of Linux news. And I mentioned earlier Red Hat, and if you know my story, Red Hat was actually the very first exposure that I had to Linux back in college. And Red Hat was, I think, the first company to offer Linux commercially. Okay, in 1993 they were incorporated, I think. And I think the first version of Red Hat, I think, was 1994, if I'm not mistaken. And Red Hat, as a distro, they offer their Red Hat Linux Enterprise Edition. So they don't really offer their distro just to people to download, but they do kind of through Fedora. Okay, if I remember correctly, the last distro that Red Hat released, I think, was 2004, and I think Fedora was the one. Basically, the distro version that all of us can download is Fedora, because it is supported by Red Hat. Okay, let me see. Hey, good morning, Perkel. Thank you so much for joining. Hello, Fedora here. Yeah, Fedora, exactly. I really enjoyed using Fedora and OpenSUSE. That was one of the first distros that I used back then. So I didn't have a good experience with Red Hat back then, because back then Linux was really hard, and I wasn't smart enough to figure out how to get it to work. So I didn't come back to Linux for many years until Ubuntu showed up. Okay, and then after that, I used many distros, but the ones that I can remember was Ubuntu, Fedora, OpenSUSE, and then and I used many other distros in between. But I finally used Linux Mint, and that's my main. I just use Linux Mint like 99% of the time, and so I've never looked back. Okay, so that's my distro of choice. And Sam, yes, don't forget Manjaro. Yes, Manjaro, Arch Linux. So yeah, so so Red Hat. I think Red Hat is extremely significant in the whole Linux community and just open source as a whole. And the reason why is, and I talk about this every episode because it's all related to each other. Because as a business, they were the very first company to show other companies and businesses that you can actually be profitable using an open source operating system, an open source alternative, open source services. Red Hat was the very first company to do that, and they did it early on. If you remember, 1994, 1993, Linus Torvalds, and then combined with Richard Stallman's GNU, it was 1991, right? And so Red Hat was right there at the beginning. And it's paid off because Red Hat was the first company to have revenues of $1 billion as an open source company. And that's huge. That's absolutely amazing because it proved the point. It proved the point to other companies who were like Windows Shop, okay? That's primarily the operating system that every corporation uses, okay? Not many corporations use Apple to run their servers and stuff, okay? It's just being real. And so whenever Red Hat became successful, other companies saw that. And because Red Hat had that success, more companies adopted Linux. You know, obviously they were using Red Hat services, but that's how powerful that was. You know, and now Linux in corporations, in businesses, in all the stuff that's running the backend in a lot of places, I would attribute a lot of that because of Red Hat. Okay, if they did not have the success that they did, I do not think, in my opinion, that we would be where we are today in terms of a business standpoint. Because if the companies do not adopt this and governments don't adopt this, I can guarantee you, even though it's open source, the community would not be as large as it is today because you need all that money, all that support, the entire ecosystem to support that. And so, you know, Linux is massive. So it's not just consumer based, it's business, it's governments, and you need all of those things. And Red Hat, in my opinion, is an amazing thing that they did because not only were they the first open source Linux company to reach 1 billion, but in 2016 they reached revenues of $2.6 billion. And then this year in 2017 they are projecting revenues of $5 billion. That's massive. Just think about that, okay? An open source company offering Linux is going to be valued, well, not valued, yeah, valued at over $5 billion in revenues. That's massive. And so Red Hat has grown a lot since then. It is not purely an open source company, okay? They have proprietary services as well because they've bought out other companies, okay? Because they have to. Okay, they have partnerships with companies like Microsoft, okay, and they have partnerships with all their competitors as well, okay. And so what Red Hat has done really intelligently is Red Hat saw where the market is going. A lot of these companies see where the market is going. So where the market was going is, if you've worked in a corporate environment, you understand this whole notion of client server, okay. So if you tell somebody about the cloud, people in general have heard of that before, the cloud, right? But honestly, the cloud is nothing new. It's been in businesses forever. Client server, that's all it is. It's a server, and then they are offering your applications and stuff to the clients, which is your dumb device. That's all cloud computing is. And so all the real processing, all the data, everything is being stored on these servers, okay, and then they're providing it to all these dumb terminals, these clients. That's basically what client server is, okay. So your computer that you have is not really where all the power, all the storage, all the processing, all the heavy lifting is done on the server side, okay. And so Red Hat's previous model is something that's been around forever. You will have a server. Most of the time, you know, it's going to be a Unix server, but now instead of having Unix on it, you will have a version of Red Hat on it, okay. So that's typically how it works. However, the model has changed. You know, it's more about these cloud services, so client server on a much bigger scale, to where like Amazon Web Services, right? You would just log into servers on the cloud. You know, businesses do this a lot, and you would use all their servers, all their services, all their technologies in the back end. So you yourself as a company do not have to invest hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to buy a server, have the support and all of that on there. You would just use their cloud services. And so that's why Red Hat is growing so much. And also, I mentioned this earlier, for Microsoft, their Azure cloud services is one of their fastest growing and most profitable sectors. And so a lot of companies are heading towards this whole client server model, okay, or cloud as they call it, okay. So that's why they're making so much money, okay. And let me see, Vasil's asking, future is coming, the time we will authenticate with smartphones and OS in order to get access to our paid app is moving to picture slowly. Yeah, Basil, definitely. This is really the official client server model. All of our devices will be dumb terminals. They will only have enough processing and hardware just so that we could use it, but all the real data that's stored, all the processing, everything else, it's going to be done on these servers on the back end, in the cloud, okay? Whether it's Red Hat, whether it's Amazon Web Services, whether it's Google's web services, or whether it's Microsoft's, and later on Apple. Apple also offer cloud services through iCloud, okay? And so we are heading into this world, and I talked about that many times before, where in the future, we won't really have anything on our devices, okay? We would maybe just have basic things, okay? But all your operating systems, everything's gonna be in the cloud, okay? You truly have a dumb terminal that you cannot use unless you are connected to their cloud services. And so, I don't know why that movie turned off. So that's where we're heading, and that's why, actually we're already there for the majority of us, but in the future, you will not have anything on your device. Everything's going to be on the cloud, and so, or this advanced client server model, okay? So Samuel, in short, Red Hat has a Kickstarter open source project. Yeah, the biggest Kickstarter open source project in the world. Rose said Zora is kind of acting like Red Hat. They provide a service with a fee if you buy Zora and Ultimate. Yeah, Rose, and actually, you know, by Red Hat doing this, okay, they've proven a model that will work, okay? And I have mentioned this many times before. As much as we love Linux, as much as we love the fact that it's open source and free, it can't be free, you know? It just can't. I mean, it can be to a certain extent, but you know, you have to pay people, you have to grow, and you need money to do that. And so by what Red Hat is doing, it's showing that you can, from a business perspective, they did this a long time ago, that you can be profitable using open source software and tools and services, okay? And so it'll allow other companies who want to run it as a business so that they can continue running. It will allow other distro makers to expand into other areas. And so don't be surprised, Ubuntu was one of the first to do this in terms of a distro that most of us can recognize with. But you'll probably see more distros in the future doing something similar. Don't be surprised if Linux Mint, Zorin, Manjaro, all of these will have some type of business relationships in the future because they have to. Okay, so don't be surprised when that happens. But I'm thinking Red Hat, once again, as a pioneer, they're able to do this well because in one case they have their commercial side, right? Where you have to pay to play. You have to, okay? But then they're still supporting Fedora, which we could download anytime. And so I think that's where all of these Linux distros will head in the future because they have to. And so in the future, you will have a Linux Mint commercial version, and then you will have your consumer version, open source, purely open source, where you could just download for free. Okay, so I think that's where all of them are heading. Okay, at least the big distros, okay, the Ubuntu's, the Linux Mint, and you know, Debian powers all of them, but I don't think as many people just download purely Debian as they do these other distros, in my opinion, okay? And so that's where we're heading, and because of Red Hat's success, we're going to get there faster. And so I'm not sure what other Linux company will come in the future that will have similar success, but more than likely they will have a partnership with probably a bigger company like Microsoft or something, you know. And so I just want to congratulate anybody who's actually in Red Hat for their successes because this is a big thing. They've been doing this for a long time now, and they really help push Linux in areas where it really wasn't there. Okay, I mean, I'm so happy that Linus Torvalds and Richard Stallman were able to produce Linux as an operating system, GNU Linux, but I'm also happy that companies like Red Hat exist and are successful so that Linux can move into other areas, okay, so that we can continue using Linux today. And so, yeah, so awesome. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about today. And speaking of Alibaba, they also recently inked a deal with Red Hat to provide cloud services for Alibaba. And that is significant because, as I mentioned earlier, Alibaba is pretty much the second largest company in China. behind Tencent. And if you don't know who Tencent is, look them up. A lot of games that you're playing, mobile games, they're owned by Tencent. And their user base is absolutely insane. And they own many, many other properties. And so if there's not anything else, that's really the only 3 topics I had today. I thought that that maybe, I think last week, who was on there? I can't remember. Oh yeah, there was a regular user, and I can't remember his name right now, but he wanted to talk about Blade Runner 2049, and so I was hoping that he was on here so we could talk about that, because I did have some more thoughts on that, but I couldn't talk about it last week. And so yeah, no, it wasn't Lance Rose. Oh man, I feel bad that I can't remember, because he's on there here all the time. But anyways, you know who you are. I feel bad that I can't remember right now. But I did want to talk about Blade Runner 2049 as a bonus episode, because I'm still thinking about that movie now. So if there's anybody on the chat that wanted to talk about that, I will. But if not, I would close off this episode, or if there's not any other topics. And so yeah, today I talked about WhatsApp having their live feature. And then, oh yeah, I'm sorry, Gaza Imp. Gaza Imp, sorry we didn't get to talk about Blade Runner 2049 last week because I didn't have time. I actually was going to talk about it this episode, but unfortunately you're not on this episode. And so maybe it might be not as new news, but if you are on the live episode next week, we can't talk about that unless you want to talk about that now. Okay, good. So I did want to talk about that because I will forget about it. So, Rose, I guess you've seen it. Okay, so if you're interested in this conversation, it's going to be cool, because I did really want to talk about Blade Runner 2049. Now, I did do a spoilers review a few episodes ago, so I'll leave a link up there somewhere if you want to see it. And man, my internet just froze, and so I've been having internet problems. And so if you have not seen Blade Runner 2049, I recommend you go watch that. Because this will be really spoilers heavy, and if you have seen it, you know, this would be a cool conversation. Rose, I will watch the movie tonight. Oh, Rose, well, if I talk about it, then it'll spoil your movie. So maybe I'll save it till next week, because maybe not everybody have seen it, but I'm like, man, I really wanted to talk about it because I'll probably forget. Okay, so I'll leave that till next week. If I remember, and hopefully Gaza Imp, you will be on the next episode as well. It's okay, I watched the movie, the original. All right, good. I'm just going to go ahead and go with this, because I really enjoyed the movie. And so Blade Runner 2049, it comes right after, not right after, but like about 35 years right after the original Blade Runner, okay? And so this gets into the spoilers territory, okay? And even if you have not seen the original Blade Runner, Samuel S. is asking Hollywood. Okay, I'm not sure what you mean, Samuel. And so if you remember in the final director's cut of Blade Runner, the 1982 movie, you remember that on that cut at the end, they actually showed Deckard with the bird, right? The floating bird. And it was the other character. And Gaza M, oh, thank you so much for joining, Gaza. Gaza, I just wanted to say that I wanted to talk about Blade Runner 2049, that last week's episode, but I couldn't because I didn't have enough time. And so now I wanted to talk about this episode, but you weren't here, but now you're here. And Rose she hasn't seen it, but she's cool with cool with actually listening about it, talking about it. So I'm going to leave spoilers, okay? So let's go ahead and get into this. And so, yeah, so if you remember the original Blade Runner, the final director's cut, if you remember the whenever they had dreams, right? On the original Blade Runner, you would see, he saw a unicorn. That was in the director's cut. Deckard's character. Samuel, yes, is it a Hollywood movie? Yes, Samuel, look up Blade Runner. Maybe you're too young. It's an amazing movie. But you remember that he had dreams of seeing this unicorn. And so that was an implanted memory. That's what it suggested. And so at the end of the final director's cut, Deckard could be a replicant. Okay? And years later, Ridley Scott specifically said that Deckard was a replicant. But then the writers of the movie said that maybe he's not, so there's still that ambiguity. Okay, so you're not sure if Deckard is a replicant or not. And so if you watch the original Blade Runner, the actual final director's cut, it leaves that really unknown. And so in Blade Runner 2049, it expands upon that big time. And so whenever you get into the movie, you find out real quick at the beginning, Ryan Gosling's character K is a replicant. Okay, but he's like a Nexus 8, if I remember correctly. And then, as you find out later, when K actually kills the replicant, and it's the big guy, Batista, I can't remember his character in the movie, kills him, he finds out that underneath the tree is some buried bones. And the buried bones is actually Rachel, which she's from the first Blade Runner, which was Deckard's love interest, and she was a replicant. But the thing here is that she actually had a baby. She actually gave birth, and she's a replicant. And that's the whole thing about Blade Runner 2049. What does Philip K. Dick says from his novel, Rose? I don't remember. So if you're not familiar with the original story, this was a story written by Philip K. Dick. He's also the same one that did Total Recall. And I don't remember, Rose. It's been such a long time. I don't know if he specifically said that Deckard was a replicant as well. I don't remember. I can't remember the last time I read that. Okay, I don't even remember reading the whole thing. And so I'm not sure. I'm just going to go by the movie. Okay, and so Ridley Scott says he is a replicant, but then the writer said, the screenwriter said, no, he isn't. Okay, and so there's always been that ambiguity of whether or not he is a replicant. But in Blade Runner 2049, they expand upon that more. And so Gaza's saying there's so many breadcrumbs leading to Deckard being a replicant, but it's great how the film doesn't explicitly say so. Yes, Gaza, that's why I love that. And that's why I love the fact that the director and the screenwriters of Blade Runner 2049, they run with that idea. They don't say it's yes or no. But from the opening shots of Blade Runner 2049, when you find out that Rachel herself actually had a replicant baby, then you start to wonder, is it half human, half replicant, or is it a full replicant baby? And that is the whole thing of why this is so big in this world. Because when Kay, who is a replicant, Ryan Gosling, goes back to his commander, Robin Wright, she says this news could destroy the world. And it could. Because if the replicants are able to reproduce, then what about the humans, right? And now they are their own new society, their own new species that could reproduce without the humans. And so not only would it introduce a brand new species, it would also change the power control dynamic of human civilization. Because before, thank you so Sam for joining. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. And so that's the big thing. It would cause wars. It would be a war between replicants and humans. And as a matter of fact, if you watch the Blackout anime for Blade Runner 2049, replicants were sent out to fight wars and to kill other replicants on these other planets, okay, these moon planets. And so that's why that thing was so big that Rachel had a baby. And then as you remember in Blade Runner 2049, we get into this whole issue of whether or not Kay is actually the child of Rachel and Deckard. And that's what I loved about that movie, because you are effectively becoming Kay because you don't know what's going on. Lance, good morning. Thank you so much for joining. Wow. Thank you so much for joining. So we're at the tail end of this live episode, and now we're actually talking about Blade Runner 2049, which Gaza had wanted to talk about on the original live episode last week. And so, yeah, Rose, Kay is, yeah, and so that's why it's mysterious, because as you're watching the movie, you don't know whether or not Kay is actually the child of Deckard or Rachel. You don't. And that's why it's so cool, because as he's trying to figure this out, you're trying to figure it out. And at the same time, you know, you go to Tyrell's corporation, okay? And then you find out now they have these new advanced replicants that are very obedient, okay? Because, you know, his main right-hand replicant is Love. And as I mentioned in a spoilers review, she has a lot of emotions that it seems like she wants to express. You know, she's crying through a lot of scenes. And I think there's a lot of anger there. There's a lot of sadness. But because of this new obedience programming that Tyrell has put in all his new replicants, she cannot act upon it. Whereas somebody like K, he is not part of the new Tyrell replicants. He's still part of the Nexus 8 replicants. He is a combatant replicant, if I remember correct. That's really what he is. And so Love is a combatant replicant, but she is one that is very obedient. Okay, and so I think there could have been a potential love interest there, because if you remember, there was a scene where Kay would go get the bones of his potential mother, Rachel, and to find out more about it. And it seems like Love is interested in him, you know, so that's why she kisses him later on when they have their final battle. And then, you know, as we're going through all of this, you as a viewer still do not know what's going on. I mean, is he a replicant or isn't? Because he has those dreams that he had that horse that he had when he was younger. Oh, I'm sorry, Tyrell, no longer called Tyrell Corp. What is it called? Is it, okay, I can't remember now. But, okay, but, yeah, I know what you mean, because the original Tyrell was shut down. I can't remember the name now. But anyway, the new corporation, okay, which is now owned by Jared Leto's character, and I can't even remember his name as well. He's blind, okay? But, then so, whenever he has all these memories, he keeps flashing back. And then when he finally goes to that area, and it's outside of the main city of Los Angeles, and then he finds that horse that he supposedly hid in his memory, he just goes crazy because he does not know if he's their son or not. And then he goes to the memory maker. And I think he even went to the memory maker, I don't know if it's before or after. And this person, she makes memories for all these replicants. And then when he tells her about this story, she cries afterwards. And then you're not sure why she cries. But then it's only later on that you find out, later, at the end of the movie, that she is in fact the child of Deckard and Rachel. And that she was implanting her memories into Kay. And the way that, you know, I'm like, it really sucked the way that Kay died, you know, because he died, supposedly, at the end of the movie, knowing that, number one, he was not Deckard's and Rachel's child, and he really wanted to be. And then whenever the replicant resistance, Wallace Corporation, thank you so much, Rose, I could not remember, but, you know, when the resistance told him that they all wanted to be their child, because I'm pretty sure all of them had similar memories implanted into them. Okay, and so, you know, if you look back at the old Blade Runner, memories are what make us human. Okay, and so that's why they implanted these memories in these replicants, so then they could feel a sense of humanity in a lot of ways. Okay, and so that's the thing. They are artificial life forms, but they're not artificial intelligence as the way that you would think. Because, as you know, in the movie, Kay actually has a love interest. Okay, she's a hologram, you know, and her name is Joy. And she is purely artificial intelligence, but it's so funny how in artificial intelligence, Kay believes that another artificial intelligence loves him when she is programmed that way. But the replicant is so advanced that they're not programmed in a way. They're learning constantly. And they're like really human, to be honest with you. And so the whole time I was watching this version of Blade Runner 2049, it's really hard to tell who's human and who's not. Whereas in the original Blade Runner, because there weren't as many replicants per se in this movie, you know, there's really only 4 that they focus on. You kind of knew who the replicants were. Whereas in Blade Runner 2049, you didn't. Okay? And so with Wallace, what he was trying to do is basically replicate what Tyrell did, because Tyrell was an absolute genius, and Wallace is a genius as well, but he wanted to replicate this to where he would have his own replicants reproduce. Okay, and I'm not sure why he wanted it that way. I mean, I guess he would have more control. Okay, so if replicants were able to reproduce on their own, and since Wallace was able to put in their programming DNA that they are obedient to him, then he could effectively control multiple worlds, because he has millions and millions of replicants all around the world. And so you don't really learn a lot about Wallace. And to be honest with you, I really wasn't interested in Wallace's characters. I was more interested in Tyrell from the original movie. He was a lot more interesting to me. You know, Wallace, yeah, I mean, to me, the only interesting scene, and this was really a powerful scene. You remember this from the movie. He captured Deckard, okay? So this is after Kay found Deckard. And then Love came and basically like captured Deckard and really destroyed Kay back then. You know, he got beat up pretty bad. Okay, he got damaged. Okay, and so when Deckard is there talking with Wallace, and this is where the whole thing of like whether Deckard is a replicant or not, I thought, man, okay, now we're gonna find out, because the way that Wallace talks, he's saying that it wasn't an accident that Deckard met Rachel. You know, so it wasn't an accident that he was attracted to her and that he fell in love with her. And so was that designed, i.e., are you a replicant, or he didn't leave the other part? Because Deckard finally came out and saying he knows who he is. You know, he knows who he is. He sees himself as a human. And but the way what Wallace was saying, he was saying he was a replicant. And if you've seen the movie, it could be going two ways. It could be an awesome scene, or just really cringy, because right after he talked to Deckard, guess who comes out? It's Rachel, another version of Rachel. And honestly, the CG in this was crazy, because she really looked like Sean Young. And I was looking, and you know, when you watch this in the movie, you're seeing it as a big screen. Honestly, I couldn't tell that was CG. It looked like Sean Young from back in the 1980s movie. It looked like Rachel. It looked exactly like her. I was pretty amazed myself. Okay, and then right after he introduces Rachel, Deckard immediately says, you got the color of her eyes wrong. Her eyes were this color. I think it was green. And then Love just shot her in the head. Boom, dead. And that was a pretty powerful scene. But honestly, that was the only scene that I really liked Wallace in. Okay? And then, you know, Robin Wright's character, she gets killed. You know, Love kills her. Actually, Love killed quite a few people. And then, you know, as I'm watching the movie, and I mentioned it in a spoilers review, and maybe you could agree or disagree with this, but in Blade Runner 2049, I really felt like even though it showed that there were more people in this world, I didn't see that many people. You know, it's only like a few characters, and then he was in the city scenes a few times when he met that other, you know, like that prostitute replicant, you know, who was actually part of the resistance. And that's about the only scenes that they had a lot of people. I really felt like the original Blade Runner, it felt more alive because there was a lot of people in that movie, and they didn't really have CG back then. And so most of it is real people. And so I felt like this Blade Runner 2049, it felt more artificial, if that's not funny, you know. Rose said, don't worry, Geek, you'll be replaced with your own replicant in the near future. You know, Rose, I think I already have a replicant. Because technically, because there's 7 billion people in the world, technically, all of us have a twin out there somewhere in the world. Okay, and so, yeah, so we already have a replicant out there somewhere. Go 2.0. Yeah, I don't think people want to see 2.0. I already have brothers, Lance. If you're seeing my videos, I have two other brothers, 2 younger brothers. And so, yeah, so I really felt that Blade Runner 2049, it was more artificial to me. And so even though I really enjoyed Blade Runner 2049, I didn't really feel that same connection. And another thing about the main villain of the movie, and I did talk about this, but like Rutger Hauer's character, the main replicant, Vasil says brothers and forks not the same. You're right, Vasil. It's like a distro, right? We have a fork of the main distro. But you know, Rutger Hauer's character, the main replicant in the first movie, Daryl Hannah's character, and the other replicant who got killed early on, I felt a lot deeper connection with those replicants. You know, Rutger Hauer's character, he was much greater than what I felt with Blade Runner 2049. Even though Love was a really menacing villain, I just did not get the impact of what the original replicants were trying to do in the original Blade Runner movie, because they were really trying to have their own place of the world. You know, they wanted to be seen and respected as their own species. okay? And they did not want to be controlled by the humans, by their creators anymore. And I thought that was way more impactful. And I will never forget that last scene in the movie when Rutger Hauer's character is actually talking about, telling Deckard about all the things that he's seen in all these other planets. And all he has is his memories, you know? And then when he died, when they said it's time to die, it was a really sweet moment, you know? Very poetic, but very powerful. Whereas in the Blade Runner 2049, the final fight with Kay and Love, I did not get that same feeling at all. And honestly, by the end of Blade Runner 2049, I enjoyed the first, I would say 60% of Blade Runner 2049 a lot. I really did, because you were really invested in at least Kay's character. You didn't know what was going on, but you know, even though it didn't have the same emotional impact of the first Blade Runner, the first 60% of the movie was really powerful. But at the last half, I don't know. It's kind of like, it became like, I don't know, kind of like boring. I mean, I don't know. Maybe not necessarily boring, but I was kind of disconnected by that point. You know, I didn't really care anymore as much as I did earlier in the movie. I wasn't as invested. Okay, and so Lance is saying it'd be cool if they continue with the anime version they made. They could do so much between that time frame in the movie. You know, Lance, I think because you know Blade Runner 2049, it didn't really you know, set the box office on fire. Very similar to the original Blade Runner. So I think it'd be more of a cult classic, and they could expand upon that universe. And the reason why I say that is because unlike something with the Matrix, you remember with the Matrix, they tried to Animatrix. They really wanted to expand the world, but after Matrix 1, it was just, you know, it's actually horrible after the Matrix 1. And so with Blade Runner, since the sequel was done so well, even the anime as well, I really think they can expand upon the Blade Runner universe. And I think they might. I mean, I really hope it makes a lot of money abroad, because I don't think it's been released in China or Japan yet. And yeah, as you know, China is a huge market. And the Chinese absolutely love, in most Asian markets, they love Blade Runner. They love, I can't even remember, Harrison Ford, and so and sci-fi. So I really hope the movie does well in other countries, so that they can make other Blade Runner type shows or movies. Okay, and I think Rose mentioned that it would be cool. Oh no, I'm sorry. Basil say it would be nice if there's a Blade Runner TV series. Yeah, I think it'd be cool. And Rose is saying Blade Runner is a better film with the number of crappy films that's been released by Hollywood this year. Yeah, I agree, Rose. I was really happy that Blade Runner 2049 came out the way that it did. I was really worried it's going to be horrible, especially since I think Blade Runner should not have had a sequel. But the directors, all the actors and actresses, the screenwriters, the composer, everything, they did an amazing job. You know, they didn't disrespect the original movie, and I'm so happy about that. You know, but I'm still, for me, Blade Runner, there would never ever be an equal to Blade Runner. There would never be another Blade Runner. And let me see. Basil say no. I'll say all Hindi trends. Hey, all Hindi, thanks for joining. But yeah, I can't talk about anything else there. Yeah, and I think let me see. Okay, so Gaza earlier said that I'm glad that really didn't mess this up like he did with Alien Covenant. Yeah, Gaza, let's kind of talk about that in a brief moment, because really Scott is a great director. Nothing, you cannot take that away from him. He's done so much, you know. But later on in his directing career, properties that he directed, that he revolutionized, Alien 1 and Blade Runner, even though he was the same director with Prometheus, Alien Covenant, he just messed that up. I mean, really, I truly believe that, because if it was just Prometheus, okay, you know, you can't reproduce Alien or even get close to it. But then with Alien Covenant, that's why I didn't want to see it. You know, yeah, Rose said Prometheus was awful. Yeah, Rose, I didn't enjoy it. I just didn't. There's very few scenes that I like. And then that's why I didn't even want to watch Alien Covenant. But it's like, you know, it's directed by the same director. And so I was like, oh man, it sucked. I mean, let's be honest. hoping for more, you know. And then when I found out that he wasn't directing Blade Runner 2049, at first I was like, oh man, I wish Ridley Scott did it. But then I thought, well, he did Prometheus and Alien Covenant, so maybe he shouldn't redo it. And so he was a producer of the movie, and he did help write the script as well. And so, you know, I can't, you know, not deny that he did contribute to the success of Blade Runner 2049 as well. But yeah, so I'm thankful that he didn't direct it. Okay, and so yeah, so overall, you know, I mean, there were a lot of great moments in Blade Runner 2049. The second half I didn't like as much. And, you know, I don't know if they're going to be able to make another Blade Runner movie. If they do, I do hope that they do spend more time expanding upon the world. Like maybe seeing how replicants are done in other world, you know, in other worlds. And then also how Wallace is actually controlling these other replicants. You know, I'm interested in that. And also maybe they could expand upon the world to where, like, what happens to the replicants now. Okay, I don't really want to see something where they have a revolt, okay, and that's all it's about. Because when I think about that, if you remember watching Matrix 2, that's what happened. When they got back to Zion, they had this community and they were revolting against the machines, and it just was horrible. It just sucked. And so I hope if they do make another Blade Runner movie and they focus on the replicants revolting against the humans, I hope it doesn't turn into Matrix 2 and especially Matrix Reloaded, because that would be absolutely horrible. I think if they expanded more upon the replicants in the other worlds, more about the Wallace Corporation, more, I'm like really interested in how do they program these replicants, you know? How do they have emotions and things like that? I'm like really interested in that stuff, you know? And it would be nice to get outside of Los Angeles. You know, I know they kind of went outside that Blade Runner 2049, but I want to see replicants in other, even on Earth, you know, what they're doing. So that'd be pretty cool. And so, Rose, it depends upon Asian market. If the film does well overseas, if it does, there will be another film. Yeah, Rose, the Asian market is going to be huge. I mean, I do hope that it does well. I don't know if it's been released in India yet. And also, at the same time, whenever it comes out to the home market, hopefully a lot of people will download this or buy copies of it, because I really want the Blade Runner universe to continue growing. Okay, and hopefully we don't have to wait another 30 years for that. Okay, so it's been over an hour. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining. Thank you as always, Rose, Gaza, Lance, for joining. Vasil, thank you so much for joining. I'm trying to name Lance, of course. Who else is on here? Samuel S. joining. Thank you so much. And let me see who else is on here. I just want to make sure I get everybody, because Percadell, thank you. Viper29. You know, Viper29 also has a Linux channel as well. Go check out his channel if you haven't seen it. And yeah, if I miss anybody, I apologize. But I always want to thank you once again for joining this live episode. I know your time is very valuable. Spending an hour Saturday morning in the US, and then if you're in other countries, it's probably nighttime. Thank you so much. And so if you didn't have any other comments or questions, I can't answer them anyway because it's already been over an hour. No problem, Viper. Thank you so much, y'all. We'll see you on another live episode next week. And as always, if you did get value out of these videos, leave a like and subscribe. And if you did want to support my channel further, you could do that at patreon.com/geekoutdoors.